parable of the sower recently again, and thinking how in homeschooling, we also try to sow seeds into our children's lives. And I'm not just meaning seeds of faith, which is what many of us do try and do, but also just seeds that will bear good fruit in life in general, good habits and discipline. And, we've got goals and dreams for them. And what just struck me when I read that, and I was thinking about it in the homeschool context, is that we all want that crop to yield 100 times more than was sown, and some seed does yield good fruit. But the reality is, and this month we're talking about ideals and reality, the reality is that some seed that we sow takes longer to bear fruit, or withers and dies and doesn't bear fruit, or gets eaten by the birds. And I just want to encourage parents that when they see their children as they grow older, especially making maybe choices that they wouldn't have chosen for their kids, or things are not quite panning out, just to remember, not all your seed is going to bear the fruit that you're hoping for.
Yeah.
And it's just the reality of being human, and we have to allow our kids to make mistakes, to make their own choices. That's all part of growing up. And sometimes we have to realize that our dreams and expectations are just that's our dreams and expectations, and maybe not theirs. And so I just thought of, and I try to think of examples. And I mean, there's, you and I can share, we've got some great little examples of things where we looked at homeschooling and thought, wow, that's really good fruit. But there's also times when our kids don't, and we're not going to name names, but I just thought to tell other people about the good times and the bad times in what we've observed in our own families and other families. So yeah, so we're talking about seed that bears good fruit. So maybe let's start on the positive side. And if you've got any examples that come to mind, I'm putting you on the spot, of good fruit you've seen from homeschooling in your kids' life. And yeah, maybe some examples you can think of without naming names of when things haven't gone so good.
Sure, yeah. So I think that big families by nature, there's lots and lots of relationships, right? So we once said, okay, well, we've got 6 people in our family, so that's 6 interrelated relationships happening 6 times over. So that's 36 things going all the time. And and that gives lots of opportunity for offense to be taken, for sibling squabbles, and then you try and get into that space to try and help fix a situation, and you end up having 2 people coming at you, so there's all of that growing up. Our children made different choices at different times, things that broke our heart, but at the end of the day, where we sit now, we have deep relationships. We've walked hard journeys with some of the kids, and we're still in relationship with one another. And I think that speaks to, in our situation, God's grace and mercy that we've got through. And even though there are academic accolades that we can talk about, and excellent work ethic in our children, which are highlights, and that was one of the things that we really worked hard at, chores right from young, and standing up on the inside as well as on the outside. But for me, if I look back over all those years, I'm so grateful that we were able to walk through the hard times together in those valleys, and to see the fruit of relationships, because we did, the hard work of always going for reconciliation, being humble, asking for forgiveness, either, kid to kid or parent to kid. So for me, that is the one of the big highlights and blessings of seed sown and seeing the fruit in the later years. What would you say is yours?
Sure. Well, we still in it with some of the kids, but if I look at my older kids, it's with hindsight that I've seen some high points. Like, for example, we want our kids to take ownership of their education and be able to make their own decisions and be able to stand up for themselves. And it was with shock and horror when it happened that my son at 14, my eldest son, Jonathan, told me he no longer wanted to do the Afrikaans workbooks that I had chosen for him that we'd been working through. And he also didn't want to do English anymore. He said, he felt he had mastered those languages well enough. Languages are not his thing. And he was happy to carry on with the other subjects, science and maths. And he was doing robotics and physics and things like that. And at 14, I'm like, your education is not finished yet. You've still got to write a GED or get a matric or something. And what about if you want to study further? And so I had the little wobbly and everything. And in the end, he did get his GED and he aced it. And his English score was his worst score, but it was still very high because he's a bright kid. But with hindsight, I'm just seeing that actually that was when he took ownership and he made his own decisions and he was willing to live with the consequences of it. So, and there've been other situations since then where he's taken responsibility for choices that he's made. So yeah, that's just one that comes to mind. And then obviously seeing our kids as they're adults, learning to manage their lives, work hard, work well with their money, plan things for themselves. I know some people who still do everything for their adult children almost, if it's paperwork or red tape or travel bookings or papers and passports and things like that, like mommy does everything. And my kids are competent to handle that kind of admin themselves. So I think I've succeeded in raising adults, not raising children that still want me to do everything. Yeah, and like you, we've also had relationship struggles, but we're not going to expose our children. So it is just hard work. And but I was going to ask you to just give examples of struggles that you've seen other families deal with or disappointments that other parents have had to go through, because now you're not exposing your own family and you don't need to name names, but just so that other parents will know it's not always going to be roses.
Oh, yeah. We've obviously been in the homeschool community for a long time, so stories are collected along the way. And the privilege is that we're seeing kids that really, really struggled in their teen years coming into the fullness of adulthood and seeing them reconciled not only to parents and family, but to God as well. There's enough stories out there that we know personally of, a girl who left home at 16 and got herself into major trouble and has, there's reconciliation and has taken up the banner of Christ and is working hard in her church. And another story of a young girl who's, she had 2 children out of wedlock, and she's now finally getting her head right and starting an online business because the seeds that were sown by the mom in those young years are starting to come. But it came much later than what mom expected, kids who've made career choices and then because of that environment that they're in, ending up walking lives completely contrary to the ones that their parents would want, and then redirecting for one another reason and choosing a different career path. There's others, they're the good, so those for me are alternate success stories, which is what we're talking about. There is reality. Homeschoolers are not perfect. I think I suffered from the malady more than you when I started homeschooling. I had this vision of this picture perfect, all American kind of thing. And because that's where the information was coming from, these really, really conservative homeschooling families. And I had to get rid of that image and then deal with who was in front of me and the learning difficulties we had and the, non-typical wiring that and the problems that it presented. But there are stories out there. In fact, recently I've met an amazing family, and their kids are doing 2 instruments and 3 languages, and the family, there is peace and there is harmony, and the kids are achieving. And there's that other young boy that got his honors at 16 in engineering. So there are those, but that can not only be the only measure that we measure success by. What are we actually looking for ultimately is, and we've said it before, that we are present with our children, that we know who we've got in front of us, that we are patient with their own individual journeys, and that we don't keep on serving this image of what it should be like, because then we're looking at an ideal as versus the reality.
I was also thinking about the kind of people that, I used to read the books and the blogs and that time and time again. And, in a way, you don't want to put your hope and your trust in somebody who's not holding up that picture perfect family of, they're all married and they're all happy and they're all successful in their careers and they've all got university degrees or whatever the world presents as the success of homeschooling. But, through the years of being part of the community like you, I've also seen people with kids that went off the rails, made bad choices, got hurt. And, some of them are still getting their lives back on track. And as you say, some have got wonderful success stories. And I think that comes in. We've given our children the best roots that we can, but we also have to let them be free and not beat ourselves up if we don't look like that perfect American apple pie family at the end of the day, because we aren't. Certainly you and I aren't. And if people still don't want to follow us after this, that's also okay, but I think that's the thing about ideals and reality. We aim for the best, and it's not all the seed is going to bring a harvest, but we still got to do the best we can.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and I think on that note, we can leave it and just say it doesn't mean that we don't keep planting. We must keep sowing. We must keep doing that. Yes. The farmer doesn't say, oh, I had a bad crop this year, I'm not going to plant next year. Keep sowing, keep preparing that ground, and keep doing the right thing in love and grace with your families. Yeah, I think it was a great topic today, Shirley. Thanks for bringing it up.